Hi, everyone. I'm Chip Paul with New Pharma, and I'm very excited to bring you this little mini class on the gut microbiome. We've learned a few things. We know a few things about how this works, and we're excited to share those with you today. If you want to know more, again, we'll tell you how to do that at the end of the class, but you can always go to the New Pharma website and you'll find all you need there as far as classes and things like that. But we will have a class on the microbiome, a real deep dive on the microbiome. So if you're a physician or if you're a researcher, I would suggest this class coming up. Okay, so let's start from the basics. So how do we work, right? Well, we got to kind of understand our inputs. And in order to understand how we work, we really have to break down our diet a little bit, believe it or not, because our diet is a lot of what's wrong with us. Our diet is a lot of what causes, dysregulations in our biome. But let's talk about how your body views things. Okay, so again, your body cannot tell the difference, let's say, between high fructose corn syrup and glucose that it needs. Okay, so again, if you're overriding your body with a bunch of sugars, your body doesn't know how to interpret that. It just thinks that you're taking in a bunch of glucose. But how does this work? Well, we work through three kind of major food groups, if you will. So dietary fats are the most important thing we have to have in our diet. And again, there's 8 very important dietary fats that we must have, and we use these to build endocannabinoids, which we'll talk about in a second. The second type of food that we eat is protein. Well, what is protein really? Protein really is just basically triglycerides, okay? So it's fats, and then it's also amino acids and fats combined. So that's what kind of protein is. So it's actually kind of a subset of fats, if you will. And then the last thing are fibers and fruits, okay? And so we need fibers and fruits. These are what basically feed our microbiome, but they're also what give us a source of glucose, and we need glucose, sugar, basically to run. So, we run on sugar and fats, but we should run on fats as a preference, okay? So let's dive into this a little bit more. So once we put this stuff in us, how do we generate energy? So this is important. You think, why does this have to do with the biome? Well, what happens if you can't generate energy through normal mechanisms? You got to have a makeup system. Then it turns out the gut biome is kind of your makeup system, which is cool. But anyway, you generate energy really through 2 processes. So one is called aerobic respiration, and that involves oxygen. So you have to breathe. When you breathe, you're moving oxygen around your body. That oxygen is used by all of these different cells in cellular processes to produce energy. Isn't that cool? Through a process called cellular respiration. And if you do it through fat, you produce 10 times more energy through fat than you do through sugar. But you can basically use oxygen to burn to generate energy from fats or from sugars, okay? You can also take things that you built, and this is the way some bacteria work. So what if there's no oxygen? And again, there's certainly places in your body where there's no oxygen. So how is energy generated within cells in those places? And that's through basically anaerobic respiration, or what that is also called fermentation. So lactic acid is dealt with in your muscles through a process of fermentation. Isn't that cool? Ethanol, sugars, ethanol fermentation is sugar fermentation. So if we drink a lot, guess what? If we eat a lot of sugar, guess what? Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, so what do you do once you sort of go through these respiration processes and energy is produced? Basically, how does that work? So what do we have? What we have here is this is a blow up of a mitochondria of a cell, okay? And that cell will take in 2 different kinds of inputs, so glucose and fatty acids, and basically generate energy. Okay, so that's what you kind of do at your lowest level with all this stuff that we eat. So it kind of just boils down to fats and sugars, and then there's intermediary molecules we call amino acids. It's that simple. Okay, so now let's talk about the biome. So with that bit of understanding about kind of our inputs, let's talk about the biome and how it develops, all right? So let's talk about this in the context of neonatal development. So how does a baby develop and what happens to its biome? That's pretty important. So a baby in the womb is in a pretty neutral environment, a pretty immune-free environment. So again, they're pretty protected in the womb, but a baby will start swallowing very early in life. So they'll start doing something called fetal swallowing. And that swallowing, again, what are they swallowing? Amniotic fluid and their urine and their feces. And that swallowing begins to create a very early, very basic gut biome, okay? But when a baby is born, it's really not born with much of a biome. Now, here's some interesting differences. If a baby is born by C-section, it will not have, and very early on through the first months of development, it won't have much of some very important bacteria. If a baby is born vaginally, it will have that very important bacteria because it gets it, the baby, as it's being delivered through the vagina. Because vaginas have a biome too, okay? Isn't that cool? That's really neat, right? Now, as that baby is born and as that baby starts to eat, if that baby is breastfed, again, it's going to develop a better, more robust, robust is a better word, so robust biome than a baby that is bottle fed. Again, when you're, and just logic this out. So when you're breastfeeding your baby, aren't you basically conditioning that baby to the environment that you're in? Aren't you giving that baby the same immunity that you need in your environment as a mother? And yes, the answer to all that is yes. So it's a way that we begin to transfer our immunity that we've built due to our environment and our diet to our children, okay, through breast milk. All right, so that's the very beginnings. If you disrupt any of these, oh, and by the way, urban versus rural lifestyle, certainly, and it's because of diet, you know, it's because of diet and environment, but we do better in rural environments, so we do urban environments. And alcohol, you know, alcohol affects all of this. Well, what could go wrong in this process? Well, again, you could be delivered by C-section and bottle fed, and you're kind of right off the nip, you've got some problems, all right? But if you get, you know, if a baby gets a lot of antibiotics very early on, I would say below the age of 3, and we'll talk about why in a second, if they get antibiotics, this is not a good thing. Antibiotics wipe out your gut biome. They kill the bacteria, and then it's got to regrow. And it's going to regrow really around, you know, whatever your diet and environment is right then, right? Because it's got to start from somewhere, and it's going to start from whatever you put in it after you've taken antibiotics. So antibiotics are not a good situation for little kiddos under the age of 3. Again, what do you do if they have fever? Well, we're going to have all kinds of products soon that really begin to address some of these things in very early, small age children, okay? Because right now, where you go is Tylenol, and Tylenol is one of the most dangerous things on the planet. Honestly, it's not a good thing, and I mean no offense, Bristol Myers Squibb or whoever owns the product, but it's, you know, the CDC tracks deaths in bars from Tylenol. Okay, so again, as this biome develops, it's critically important from birth to age 3 years old. Why? Because that's also when your brain is developing. And your brain does 90%, 90 percentiles of its development up to the age of 3. So past the age of 3, you've got 10% left to develop your brain. You develop most of your brain up until the age of 3. And again, we'll see in just a second the amount of signaling between the brain and the gut biome. But it's very important to understand this, that very early in life, you know, we do all these things to our babies up until the age of 3 that are detrimental to this whole situation, and we need to change that. It's why our kids are sicker than we are. Okay, so bacterial influence on behavior. This is kind of cool. there's a bacteria called Toxoplasma gondii. And this bacteria, and this goes to really the argument of, I get ready for bed and I get cravings for sweets. Anybody else get that? Or, you're driving down the road and you go past the Dairy Queen or the Brahms, and you're like, ooh, ice cream sounds nice. Is that the bacteria talking, or is that us talking? Now, we don't think about that, but that bacteria talks. That bacteria has control over some cool brain elements like dopamine and serotonin, and it can give us goodies or take them away. Seriously. So, does that bacteria alter our behavior? Probably, because it certainly alters the behavior of a mouse. And so get this Toxoplasma gondii, it has to develop, it's born in the intestines of a cat, okay? But it can't live out its life there. So a cat will poop it out. Mice will eat the cat poop and get infected with a certain stage of this bacteria. The bacteria will cause the mice to lose their sense of smell and basically their fear of cats. So mice are born with this innate sense of smell. When they smell a cat or cat urine, they run away. Well, this organism gets rid of that. And basically it makes them way more susceptible to being eaten by the cat. When the cat eats them, that allows that bacteria to reinfect the cat and develop again. So it's like this circle of life, but somehow that bacteria understands that circle and manages to stay alive. But isn't that cool? And again, bacteria are making the same chemicals that we need to run our mind. So they make dopamine, they make precursors, they make tyrosine and tryptophan and phenylalanine, which is where we make dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. Cognition and emotion come from those chemicals. Okay, so how do we regulate all of this stuff? How do we manage our gut microbiome? Well, it turns out that we manage it in the same way that we manage everything else in our body, through something that we have called the endocannabinoid system, which we specialize here in at New Pharma. And it turns out how this works is really cool, really cool. So a star explodes. What's left? Well, a lot of hydrogen and water and stuff like that we kind of know about, but are there any starter sticks of life left? Yes, it turns out there are. Something called ethanol amines. And ethanol amines are basically what combine in our bodies to form phospholipids, which are very important storage mechanisms for energy. But these ethanol amines also form with fats. Star stuff forms with fats in our system to form endocannabinoids. Endocannabinoids are formed from star stuff and fats you put in your body. Isn't that cool? So this is a super duper complicated slide. DiMarzio, you could thank him for this slide, but it's a really, really good slide. So again, what I want to point out to you is this right here. So these guys right here are your main endocannabinoids. And again, they're built through a process of ripping apart a phospholipid, building NAPE, and then binding to these dietary fats to build endocannabinoids. So isn't that cool? So again, dietary fats are our highest form of inputs into our body. What we lack in input with dietary fats, we make up for in the microbiome. It's kind of theory, but that's the way it's looking. Isn't that cool though? Okay, so what do these endocannabinoids do once we've got them inside of us? Well, you can look at this graphic. Again, it's a little bit of a complicated graphic, but what I want you to see is all the interaction between the biome, the gut biome, the brain. You see how all this is working, and the endocannabinoid system is regulating all of this function. So how does your gut signal to your brain? It's ultimately endocannabinoid action. How does your brain signal to your gut? It's ultimately endocannabinoid action. So the cool thing about all of this that I'm telling you, and again, some of this gets very sophisticated, but it doesn't at the highest level. At the highest level, you have a great amount of control over your health. And you do this through your diet and environment. But let's talk about that a little bit. So are we eating the right things? Absolutely not. Again, we need to really focus on two things: dietary fats and fiber, okay? So dietary fats and fiber have really everything that we need to be able to function. If you just think about growth mediums, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so let's talk about this. So again, as we put these things in our body, we need to be conscious of what these things are. So fiber is a very good thing. If you just go do a Google search on fiber as it relates to almost any health issue, you're going to find a whole lot of good stuff about fiber, okay? And fiber is what is needed to promote good bacterial growth. And it's just that simple, okay? It's just that simple, is we need fiber to be able to promote this good bacterial growth. Where does this fiber come from? Vegetables and fruit, so that's where we need to get this fiber. And again, if you want to look up really fibrous, carbohydrates, look it up. There's a lot of them out there, but you're looking for something called inulin. Inulin is a high, that is best fiber, all right? So what about sugar? What about fructose? That's in everything, by the way. It's freaking in ketchup. It's in everything, okay? Start reading labels, start paying attention to fructose and sugar. Because again, we need to steer clear of that. It's this simple. If back here in my lab, if I want to grow some bacteria, we try not to in our labs or food lab, but if I wanted to grow bacteria, again, the way that I would do it is I would grow it in sugar, agar, okay? Guess what? When you eat a lot of sugar, guess what happens? You create this bacteria-rich environment. You're like a big petri dish of agar, and we all are right now because of what we eat. Corn syrup, agar. Okay, so gut dysbiosis, so dysregulation, is what causes most diseases. It's a big statement. I want to make sure y'all get it. Gut dysregulation is what causes most diseases, including a really interesting one that we're going to talk about in a second. Big finish. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, you need a microbiome. You need a gut microbiome. But again, if you're not eating the right things, this biome is going to try to pick up the slack. It's going to try to save you. It's going to try to make the chemical mediators that you're missing. And that's a really cool thing about human function. It's like our diesel generator, right? So if we lose electricity, we got our diesel backup here that can make a lot of stuff that we need and we'll stay alive, which is cool. But again, the more stuff we need to stay alive, guess what happens? We have to make more bacteria or allow more bacteria to form. And we have to allow more and more and more bacteria to form. And if these bacteria are growing in a perfect growth medium, the opportunity for them to become pathogenic is large. And if those bacteria become pathogenic, they produce things that hurt us. Fever is produced by something called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. That is produced by pathogenic bacteria. Yes. Okay, so I'll just kind of leave this to the reader, so to speak. But I want you guys to look at all of these internal causes for gut dysbiosis, so dysregulation. And again, there's many. The other thing that I want you to pay attention to is environmentally. Anything that has a strong smell, like cleaning stuff, is antimicrobial, antibacterial. Your sense of smell, like when you smell that high pine smell, you're sensing that as pine because of something called a TRP channel. By the way, anandamide in the endocannabinoid channel also affects the TRP channel. But the TRP channel is how we sense things. And again, very powerful things will enter us through that TRP channel and cause changes. And TRP is how you cause changes to bacteria. So things with strong smells, not necessarily things you want to be around for a long time. Disinfectants, antimicrobials, antibiotics, the hand sanitizers. Sadly, these hurt us. They are hurting our biome, and this goes to immunity, and we're going to have a whole another one of these mini classes on immunity, because again, we need this one first, because we need to establish kind of where immunity is built, and it's built in the biome, but you can wreck it in a heartbeat every time you walk out of the bathroom and do this, and then this. Okay, so this is a controversial one, I'll just tell you. I had a great conversation. So our university relationships are with a university called University of Mississippi, and they have one of the best pharmacy schools in the country. You know, they've been studying natural products for a long time. And again, you know, my relationship there is with a PhD, but I was having a conversation with him the other day about this very thing. And again, where this used to be hugely controversial, that cancer came from a bacteria, this is now becoming more and more mainstream. If you call me, you know, if you go to our website, you click on Ask Chip, and again, I'm not a doctor, so again, I'm just, you know, giving recommendations based on my knowledge of the endocannabinoid system. But if you ask me about cancer, or if you have somebody who has cancer, I'm going to recommend something that is not cannabis, not THC1, not THC, and not a CD1 effector. I'm going to recommend a microtubule disruptor. Okay, why? Microtubules are how bacteria eat. All right, and so I'm going to recommend to use something called menbendazole, or, you know, potentially I might suggest that you can also find it at Southern Ag in the animal version called fenbendazole. But the reason for that is because those are microtubule disruptors. There's a lot of things in nature that are also microtubule disruptors. So while we'll never say anti-cancer, because, you know, that's just a big red flag for the FDA, we will have things that are microtubule disruptors, 1000%. Turmeric is a microtubule disruptor, all right? So don't think you can heal your cancer just with turmeric. But again, this information is highly valuable when you're looking at solutions for cancer, because we know how to kill bacteria. This kind of bacteria, though, does not have cell walls, which is interesting. So it's something called L-form bacteria. So if you want to read more about it, you can go out and read more about it. But, you know, this is why this is so important, okay? All right. So the good news and the bad news. The good news is you have a lot of control. You have a lot of control over your health. You have a lot of control over, you know, your function. You just need education, right? And so that's what we're here to do. And again, if you're, you know, you don't want the education, you just want the pill, you know, we'll have a pill for you. We'll have a supplement for you. But there's good news and bad news here. So the good news is we have a lot of control. The bad news is sometimes it's not going to be real comfortable for us, right? So is it comfortable for us to change our diet? No. You know why? Those bacteria are powerful, my friends. They are powerful, and they want you to stay right where you're at. But you have willpower. You can override the bacteria. You just, again, you have to exercise some willpower. But changing diet is difficult. Restricting calories is difficult. You know, fasting is difficult. There's two ways that you can, no matter what situation you're in, no matter how bad your health is, that you can generally right your ship and come back to better health. Calorie restriction and fasting. And fasting, I would say, is more important than calorie restriction. Calorie restriction is the secret to longevity, and there's just study after study after study that say that, okay? So those are uncomfortable things. Again, can we supplement so that they're not so uncomfortable? Absolutely. And we'll have a product out at Trumedics. And again, well, let's just go ahead and go. So again, if you need to find information about us, ask Chip. You can get to our class. Just go to our website, newpharma.com. Look up at the top. And again, find what you need, and generally you're gonna have a pathway to what you need up there. But if you want to buy our product, just go to Shop TrueMedics on the website, and that's where all of our products are. So we take kind of all this science and everything that we know, and we drill it down into a product set that's beneficial. So our gut product has microtubule disruptors in it, has basically very good starter fiber, and has a fermenter in it. And so that's kind of what you need to grow good bacteria. And again, that good bacteria eventually will overlap the bad bacteria. So anyway, we have a product here. We think this product will be highly useful. We'll take it to clinical trials when we can. So anyway, that's all for today.